Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Ticking Gray Bomb, Refined Taste for Idiots. I'm Mex,
Mace?
and today's episode, we're going to focus on collecting strategies, watch collecting strategies, right? And so Mace and I, we've known each other for a very long time, and we've actually shared a couple of collecting hobbies. Some people call them hobbies, others, like my spouse at least, may call them diseases or addictions. But I can tell you, so everyone's journey is unique, and I think what we're going to express today about our both our personal collecting strategies, approaches are very personal. Okay, they're really linked to our personal tastes and experiences or visions, if we can even say that. So I could tell you that, yeah, I mean, it's my journey probably started. I mean, we could all kind of go back to at some point when we got our first watch, or the watch that we had first consciousness of. That topic is for another day. But I would say that, in terms of being a collecteur or having a collection, like Mr. Wonderful would say, probably went back to about 15 years ago, right? And I think we could even talk about what a collection is, right? What constitutes a collection. Probably in the watch world, it's probably when you get your second or third watch um, simultaneously, right? Not the third watch that you've owned because you lost two, or one got stomped on by King Kong Bundy. It's because you're having these, you're building this collection, right? And wearing different things at different times with different, for different purposes, different clothing, different events, what have you. So I would say that, and when we look at 15 years ago, it probably corresponded with the rise of websites and marketplaces like Hodinkee or Chrono 24, and these things, which really like crack cocaine for the amateur collector. But it really put a lot of things at our fingerprints. And what I would say really was the fire starter, YouTube content, and we all know these folks. Could be TGV, it could be Mark from Long Island Watches, it could be Adrian from what was known as Bark and Jack, Paul Thorpe. These are folks that I leaned on initially to get a sense for collecting. Even Tim Masso, right, at Watchbox, where they would overload you with content. And for me, that was an explosion of my collection. I would buy, everything, right? Anything and everything that caught my interest that was below, let's say, $4,000. For me, I mean, that's a great way to lose a lot of money. And I do mean lose a lot of money in the sense that you're buying watches that may be thinly traded, whose value in the secondary market or in the resale market is in doubt, is not strong, let's say. So I could tell you that as my collection has evolved, I know that my tastes have evolved, right? And I'm having propensity to flip watches. I've become a flipper. Today, I think the state of my collection, and I think that's another interesting idea for a future episode. But my collection probably is about 15 to 20 watches, mostly modern, some vintage. I got into vintage during the pandemic, fundamentally because modern watches, modern sports watches in the secondary market went bonkers. And I didn't have a relationship, let's say, with a particular AD. And so really, I think if there's any trend, if there's any consistent trend in my collection, it's really one towards value, okay? One towards pieces that are going to hold value over the long term, okay? And that's where I've tried to build my collection. I think I've gotten to a point where if I had to liquidate, again, not that I want to, but if I had to liquidate one day, I wouldn't be totally upside down on this. I was about to call it an investment, but I think we all know that watches are not an investment. They're assets, just like your car would be. Some depreciate, some appreciate. I'd like to think that watches, unlike cars, most could appreciate. But there's not, or at least, yeah, at least you won't all depreciate like most cars do. But I think at the end of the day, it's for me, I think value is the overriding trend in my collection and my collecting philosophy. So I'll leave it there, Mace. I want to hear from you in terms of what your journey's been like over these last couple of years.
Yeah, I think my journey probably early on is best kind of described as function and fitting in age appropriately. Early on, be sort of those first digital watches that came out. It was kind of a cool thing to have, sucked in by um, the G-Shock and kind of those commercials that showed kind of the G-Shock strapped to a puck and the player slap-shotting it into the goal. Um, and then versions of that as I, started dating in my teenage years. Um, a girlfriend gave me, kind of a fashion watch that was a lot of money for them at the time and for me at the time, as working jobs kind of, I was a busboy and had paper routes and stuff like that. And then kind of my first kind of serious watch, I wanted something that meant a lot to me, and looked like I was a corporate professional. Um, and over the last 16 years, there have been um, hadn't hadn't felt the need to really build out my collection. Up until a year ago, I had three watches. Um, and over the last year, really just kind of crushing content, online blogs, YouTube podcasts, and really gaining appreciation for a whole variety of watches, both kind of the thick and wide watches that I really was attracted to, kind of from 2006 to 2012 thereabouts. And now kind of appreciating some watches on the smaller side that um, aren't as onerous to carry around with you, or that less likely the weight of them won't kind of like scratch them up just by doing simple things like working on the computer. And I do have more of an eye towards value, and value retention. I wouldn't quite say I think of them as investments. I just don't necessarily want to lose a lot on them. So looking more towards, pre-owned or vintage. And then, and some of that is because as I look at my first two watches that I purchased, I shouldn't even say that. First two watches that I acquired. The first was a gift for my brother.
Hey, give me the watch.
That's probably worth half of what he spent on it. And then I got another watch in 2012. Really popular. These Breitlings that were really popular, sort of in the 2010 to 2012, kind of really, the 44 millimeters. Really thick chronographs. Um, I did get two offers on that watch fairly recently, and it represents, I don't know, at least a 50% depreciation over the last 10 years. So is that me selecting brands, unfortunately, that have taken a dive over the last 10, 15 years? Yeah, probably, but I am trying to keep an eye towards, value, even if I'm not at the flipping stage. I have not sold a watch that has come into my possession. I've got a few that are contenders, but I haven't quite done it yet.
Yeah, I mean, so Mace, I mean, those are very interesting points, right? It is, we don't need, you could think about the collection as something that evolves, right? Where, I mentioned the flipping, as did you, right? Where we are we're trading up, right? And that's a journey. That's definitely part of people's journeys, right? Is the trading up. Can I get yes, everyone wants a Patek. Well, I can't say everyone, but most people would love a Patek, right? Or love an AP. But these are hard watches to get into for most people, right? So can I um, camp out with a Omega or a Rolex while I'm saving money towards acquiring that bigger boy piece, right? And that's definitely a journey, right? And yes, we haven't talked about the investment nature, but it's nice to know that as you're trying to take two steps forward, you're also not taking one or two steps back, right?
Yeah. And I think, sorry, and one thing that the way some watch prices and values have jumped up. You mentioned Patek, right? There's obviously, AP, Rolex obviously went through the roof, is seeing a bit of a market correction. Um, for me personally, I have not gone into the deep end of the pool because I would feel, one, I would worry like hell about having a watch of that value on my wrist. And then if I couldn't have enjoy it, by wearing it and kind of being able to look at it, I think I'd have a tough time, with that. Just kind of having, um, monetary funds kind of tied up in something that I wasn't enjoying, and for perhaps an unknown, return, right? If that was my initial aim in getting that watch in the first place. So anyway, sorry for interrupting.
No, no, you weren't interrupting. I mean, I was riffing on what you were saying, and I was actually but I agree with what you're saying, right? I mean, and that's another thing, in terms of collecting philosophies, right? It's like you do. I know plenty of people who have a safe for their watches, or they keep watches at a safe deposit box in the bank. Personally, I could never see that. I mean, I've had safe queens, but they haven't been in a safe, right? I would baby them, but I would want at least them to be in my house, because if I wanted to put hands on them, if I wanted to wear them even inside my house,
Right.
I could do that, right? I couldn't see the day of having a nice watch, and you couldn't see it at every moment of the day.
Right.
But again, it's different strokes for different folks, right? Everyone comes to this journey in a different way with different reasons, right? And so we talked about the flipping piece. You also said, "Hey, look, I'm not at the flipping stage," and I think that's also another journey, right, along this pilgrimage route, right? Um, it's hey, saying I want to build out some distinct pieces, right? I want to have some elements here where I'm gonna add to, I'm not gonna swap or subtract necessarily, right? That's also a very viable approach, right? And we see that also, right? As long as it might take longer to accumulate pieces, but if you have pieces you like, they're in your collection for a reason, right? They're serving a purpose, functionality wise, aesthetically, what have you, right? Price point wise. One of the things that I find is that, it's also not, from a brand standpoint, it may not be great to wear a flashy watch all the time,
Right.
right? You may want to wear, you know, a more lower key watch when you're doing certain activities, even everyday activities, right? Like going to work.
Yeah. I mean, I wear a Seiko on if I'm coaching my son's baseball team, right? It's okay. Well, if it gets dinged up, it's okay, right?
Right.
I certainly wouldn't want to do that with one of my prized possessions. I do think though that going in the vintage route, I feel, you're kind of inheriting a watch as is, right? And so it has a certain character as it is. It's got scratches on it if it hasn't been polished. Um, I find that sometimes in some weird way, I feel a little bit safer wearing that around in terms of, not dinging it or, hitting it on a doorknob or, a door frame or whatever the case may be. So I think my dog put a scratch in my Seamaster, right, by biting me, right? And it's, that's just, I'm just in the house, right? I wasn't doing anything.
Right.
I wasn't doing anything dangerous whatsoever. So, there is a certain comfort to me, kind of, my father-in-law gave me his watch and it's full of scratches, and you know, there's no way that I could further damage that watch. I mean, I guess I could crack the crystal, right?
Right.
But that watch is not going to, if I put a scratch on it, no one would notice. It would be one of 1,000.
Yep.
It has that sort of scratch patina, that gets over time.
That's a really good perspective, mate. So, I mean, I forgot to do the customary wristwatch check. So maybe I'll take the opportunity to do it now. If you can see this, this is speaking about vintage watches. This is a vintage Patek. This is one of my most recent purchases. I bought this at auction. Um, the thing I love about this is the lugs, right? It has these nice special lugs on them, and it's a decent size too. It's a 35, maybe 35 and a half. Um, Gorgeous Patek signed crown. So I really like this thing. But yeah, and again, I don't know, you probably can't see it here with the camera, but the dial does show some signs of wear, right? But it's a dial, right? So I don't know if you can see this here. There's a little reflection.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Really,
yeah.
if you will, at the 10, at the 10 o'clock, between 10 o'clock and 10:30. I
All
don't know
right,
if you can
lift
see
it
that
up a
little.
little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you say, okay, fine. That's that charm, that's that patina. But I tend to, and this is my deal. And I laugh when you talk about the door frame. I mean, I've banged so many watches on door frames, and it pisses me off to no end. But I baby my watches, and I've gotten comments that when I've gone to sell my watches, people just say, "Wow, this is in such great shape." Um, and that's a thing for me, right? I really try to. I'm very mindful, and the tiniest scratch, even though I may not be, to your point, Mace, I may not be tracking scratches on a vintage watch because they're there. It's impossible to say whether it was there before or after Mex, but yeah, I mean that's another element of collecting, right? Is um, the kind of wear and tear you want to put on certain watches.
Right. Right. And this watch is one that I reference. Is my, tag chronograph link. Um, I did have this polished at one point because there's accumulating on the scratches on the underside of the
Yeah,
bracelet. Right. And in looking back, I wish I had, right? Because you're just going to put more scratches on that, right? You're
good.
not, you can't protect it forever. I mean, especially if
No,
you're going to wear it to work, right? On the underside of your bracelet, right? So, um, but this also, your Patek also has a thinner profile, right? And so,
absolutely, yes, for
and
sure.
you would never obviously take that out to do any sort of gardening or anything like that.
Right.
This just kind of walking around, that's pretty thick.
Yeah.
Could um catch a doorknob pretty,
Oh
you know,
yeah. No, I've been there.
yeah,
Trust me,
yeah,
I've been there. And so and you mentioned the other thing, right? It's okay. Um, Case versus bracelet,
right,
right? And that's another thing I've just come to acknowledge is you could scratch the crap out of a bracelet, right?
yeah,
Who cares?
right,
The case is something that again, it's at least my mindfulness or my kind of approach is you probably want to keep the case if you can, right? I mean, keep the case as the word that came to my head is pristine, but that's impossible, right? Because you mentioned something that's important, right? Which distinguishes kind of watches from a lot of other asset classes, which is you want to wear these guys, right? And again, some people don't, but I think what you're hearing from Mase and Mex is that we love watches enough where we want to wear these things at least to a certain extent.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes, um, like my Seamaster 300M, I was really protecting it for a bit, kind of putting it on. Um, in the last few days, I've been wearing it quite a bit, and just kind of, and I think with the cooler weather coming along, I'm wearing longer sleeve shirts. You know, it's not a lot of protection, but having a long sleeve shirt, kind of protecting it for a bit, you know, acts a little bit like a security blanket,
But is
protects
that what you're
you.
thinking? So what do you think is driving you? What has driven you to wear it more in this period?
I mentioned I got a couple of straps for it. I bought it with a rubber strap, it's comfortable. They're well designed. The Omegas are well designed straps. I bought this sort of stretchy NATO that is really super comfortable. And
Yep,
the and then, sometimes with NATOs, they can bunch up and make a watch feel a lot higher on your wrist. Um, and sometimes if the watch case is big enough, like I have this Breitling and to some extent this tag, if the NATO almost makes it feel a bit higher, not just because there's two levels of fabric underneath it, but because of the way the kind of NATO hugs your skin, it almost like
absolutely.
makes it
Yeah,
pop up a bit higher. And this stretchy NATO, um, even though it's unraveling a little bit, has made it really comfortable, and I don't feel myself kind of adjusting it a lot. Um, so I think that might be driving some of my, at least the last few days. I've only had this NATO strap for 3 or 4 days. I've had it on the last few days, and it's really comfortable. So I
that's
think,
awesome.
and I think it gives it a new look too. It's got this red stripe on, coming down. It picks up some of the red highlights on the watch face. I think it looks
Yep.
sharp. Um, it's super comfortable.
That's interesting. So yeah, and that's something we can explore maybe in a subsequent episode, which is how you can accessorize your watches through straps, right? I mean, either leather straps, but more importantly, I think just because of the ease of it is NATO's, right?
Yeah.
Or others, right? Yeah, like we saw the Bonetto that was on the in a previous episode. We saw this Bonetto strap, which is also great kind of functionality. Um, so that's definitely I mean something I subscribe to, and it really should also be part of the collection because it gives you that variation, not necessarily of a wholly new piece, but of a way to spice up those those existing pieces in your collection.
Right. Right. I did that a lot with this watch, and put a green NATO on it, gave it a cool look, rubber
Yep.
straps. It just, if you don't feel like spending the money, for a brand new watch to give you a different look on your wrist, then really simple with a NATO strap or rubber. It's a couple bucks, really
Yeah,
not going
exactly.
to
I mean,
hurt you.
depending on who you use, right? And I think you've used Blue Shark, as have I, right? There's Wrist Candy. There's a lot of other companies out there who give you that optionality. Nice made NATOs, right? I'm a big fan of Adapt. They're not as they're colorful. They're not as kind of varied. Certainly they're mostly solids, but they're U.S. made, nylon, which is really tough as nails type stuff. But wide range of choices, just to change up your look
Right.
at a lower price point, right? I mean, because again, you look at some of these OEM straps or the OEM rubber straps or the rubber bees or Everest even, they're going to cost you a couple $100,
Yeah.
which is a lot, right? And those almost certainly you see folks trying to get out of those when they've sold a watch, and almost certainly you're going to get them for pennies on the dollar once you resell them.
Right. So
So
anything further to say on the collection philosophy?
no, all I think we covered some good topics here. I think what you heard from Mace and Mex is that I think it is at the end of the day important to chase aesthetics and to chase function, but to be mindful of value.
Right. All right. I think we'll put a bow on this one. Thanks for checking in with us. Keep checking in with us. We'll be building out more episodes and posting them. And we hope you enjoy this and give us feedback. Let us know what you like, what you didn't, and we'll see you the next time. All right, take care.
Take care, guys.